Axis Operations 1943 is the latest DLC for Panzer Corps II, seeing the German army take on the various events in 1943, including the Battle of Kursk, but also presents us a unique opportunity to alter history by having a branching path between a historical and ahistorical route. Hello everybody, this is Fun Police, and if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know down in the comments below, since this is a little different than what I normally do. But to not waste too much time, let's get right into the review. To start out, let me explain how I play Panzer Corps II, because there are so many knobs and dials for everybody to turn. I feel like it's a good idea to mention how I play in order to give you context of maybe where I stand on it versus where you might stand on it. So, when I play Panzer Corps II, I play on the highest difficulty of Generalissimo, where I get 80% less prestige, and the enemy has a base 20% accuracy bonus. On top of that, I also do not have heroes enabled, so I do not get regular heroes every single time I start a new scenario. Instead, I only rely on the commendation points. With that said, I also have been importing a core force that I started all the way back in Spanish Civil War. So I've had a very high veterancy and experienced army. However, I have also played through a significant amount of the campaign with the one you get from starting in 1943, so I can give opinions on both matters. In general, I would say that the way I play the campaign is usually a bit more difficult than maybe many would experience. The lack of heroes means I have to play many scenarios in a more straight manner, and I really only have the ability to rely on my high veteran units in order to have any sort of advantage. With that all said, 1943 starts off with a very easy scenario that is kind of custom to Panzer Corps II now, where every Axis operation gives you one good starter scenario. We also get access to the Panther P prototype, which I think is cool. I like that these prototypes are appearing. Then we quickly move on to one additional scenario and a training scenario, and immediately dive headfirst into Kursk. Kursk is made up of roughly 3 to 4 scenarios, depending on how you want to count it, but I overall really enjoyed my time with Kursk. Every scenario felt like it was very well crafted to make it feel like a grind to get through. Tons of minefields, emplacement, strong points, tons of AT guns and infantry that are highly entrenched, and not to mention significant armor and Air Force power. In fact, this is probably the strongest Air Force we've seen in almost any Panzer Corps II scenario. It's truly quite a powerful force. I want to especially mention Provoroka as being a scenario that almost made me fail it. Even with my highly veteran force, I only managed to take the secondary bonus objective on the last turn with my very last unit that could reach it. It was an extremely close nail-biter, but it was a ton of fun in my opinion. I also should mention that I was very happy that in the training scenario of 1943, we finally get the payoff if you've raided the Great West Aerodrome in Britain in 1940. Being able to finally get not only an extremely powerful hero, but also a gift Me-262 jet fighter was an excellent payoff. I'm very happy on how that was handled. I also really liked that in Operation Roland, the 6th Army would actually intervene if you had succeeded in saving them in 1942. It was nice that there was more of a payoff there than just having it be like a flag to go on the alternate history. Them showing up felt like you actually did save them, and then they essentially repaid the favor. That was really cool. Once you got done with Operation Roland, if you've completed either 2 bonuses out of 3, which was saving 6th Army, completing the bonus objective in Provoroka, or completing the bonus objective in Roland, you had to get 2 of those 3, you could go down the alternate history path, or we could go down the historical path. To start off with, I started with the alternate history path, and I gotta admit, I did not enjoy it as much. The biggest thing I felt was that the difficulty eased up significantly. Although scenarios like Stalino were at least a decent challenge and had some modest forces, stuff like Rostov 1943, Ilista, and Astrakhan I felt were largely absent of forces that could seriously threaten. They had a few armored units here and there, and notably Astrakhan did have a decent armored force, but I finished almost all of these scenarios with like 5 turns remaining, and I found them just particularly quite easy. And I found that a bit disappointing that there was just no real challenge in them. Return to Stalingrad is the one notable exception, and I think does a decent cap-off to the alternate history by providing a significant armored force that felt like it could really pose a challenge. That one was quite enjoyable. I do also have to commend the fact that the alternate history is building a more realistic attempt at how Germany could reverse its fortunes in the war. I feel like there were some big problems with, like, say, the base campaign or many other games where Germany essentially goes into 1944 losing, but then, we just counterattack and take Moscow and completely defeat the Soviets in 2 months, and then we, invade Britain a month later, and then we're on U.S. shores in 45. The Axis operations is taking, I think, a much better approach by showing us, okay, we were successful at beating the Soviets. We encircled Kursk and won at Kursk, and then we destroyed the Soviets again by pinning them against the Black Sea. And then this allows us to go into the Caucasus again and cripple the Soviets in a more significant manner that might allow us to continue the war. I think this was a really good decision, and I do really like that. And I'm very interested to see where it goes in 1944 in the alternate history. In the historical route, we fail at Kursk, but I have to admit I enjoyed this significantly more. Unlike in the alternate history, I felt like the difficulty of many of the historical scenarios remained effective, largely because almost every scenario had significant armor forces that you had to fight through. Whether it was at Orel, where the Soviet vanguard was pressuring you hard from the rear, but there was also some significant armored forces blocking your path to escape towards Orel. It was, I think, a very good scenario, and that can be said for most of them. I also really liked the Taman Peninsula, which was an air-only scenario. I thought it would be like most other air scenarios, but it was a grueling experience, and actually was one of the few ones that have made me restart multiple times, because I needed to be so protective of my air force, because otherwise they would get shot down by these incredibly powerful air units. On top of that, Zhytomyr, the final scenario for the historical route, felt like a mega clash of armor. The Soviets were not only highly experienced, but it contains tons of overstrength, hero-ridden armored units. And they were able to, again, make me restart several times because my armor would be desecrated. It was only thanks to the Jagdpanthers that you got through commendation points and things like elephants backing up tigers and panthers that I was able to stem the tide and actually win. It was a very challenging scenario, and I really liked that. And I think that's my biggest thing, is that the historical route felt like you were constantly facing armored formations that were matching your forces. The ahistorical route didn't really do that outside of the last Return to Stalingrad scenario. And as such, it felt significantly harder, in my opinion, and much more engaging overall, to play the historical route rather than the ahistorical route. I hope that in 1944, in the alternate history, the Soviets or whoever we end up facing if we end up going to the West, I hope that we end up seeing more significant armored formations and strong air forces that really do put pressure on us and force us to be they are able to trade blows with us more effectively. One of my primary complaints that I feel that I needed to bring up is that in 1943, the commendation point system that we had access to gave us a variety of different units, and many of them were fun and enjoyable. Stuff like getting the Comet early or being able to pick up Italian equipment was neat, but it made me realize that I'm personally kind of getting bored of the commendation system. Early on in Panzer Corps and the Axis Operations series, the commendation system could often give us advanced prototypes and unique units, but at least in 1943, and when I look back on it, 1944, it feels like the equipment that I'm being offered is just at best a side grade, but very often a straight downgrade. Stuff like, for example, in the Panther Line or Rostov 43, we can capture a ton of Italian equipment, but for 6 commendation points, there's maybe 1 or 2 things that I think you could really justify. Everything else essentially is just worse than your standard armored units. And I think that was a bit of a shame. So I hope that going forward we can maybe see some different things with Axis Operations. Obviously we could still see prototype units and heroes. I really do like the heroes, like the Japanese tanker hero. That one was fantastic. I love those. But I hope that maybe the developers could come up with something slightly more interesting and engaging in terms of commendation points. I just am not wowed as much anymore. However you want to do this is varied, and I can't give lists, but personally one of the things that always made me so excited were the uber heroes, like for example Adolf Galland from Spanish Civil War. He cost 10 commendation points and was essentially the mega payoff for doing all the bonus objectives. So maybe we could see like a tank hero that is really overpowered and we can get him as a big commendation sink, rather than capturing equipment that ends up just not really being that impactful or even useful. I think something similar could be said with the hidden caches. The hidden caches in 1943 were a bit varied in their packaging. Most notably, many of the hidden caches that contained air units, I think largely were just worse overall, but I think that the ones containing ground units were at least okay. The biggest ones I enjoyed were giving us like unique Soviet equipment like the Su-152 or the ISU-152. Those units were, I think, work really well as captured hidden caches because they're so unique. And I hope that if we get into 44 and 45 that we see hidden caches remain a thing, but I also hope that they offer equipment that are more impactful, or at least side grades to where I could see using them over my regular equipment. I am disappointed when hidden caches or commendation points are just not like giving me stuff that I could actually use if I'm just not intentionally going for mixing them in. Overall, however, I had an extremely fun time with Axis Operations 1943, and in terms of all of the DLCs that have come out for Panzer Corps 2, I would rank this as probably one of my favorites. I think 1941 I enjoyed a little bit more, but I think this is definitely a much better than Axis Operations 1942. And if you're going to pick out any of the Axis Operations to buy, I would say either pick 41 or 43. It's really good. I really, really enjoyed it. But that is it for my review. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Again, let me know down in the comments if you enjoyed stuff like a review on Panzer Corps 2 stuff. And also make sure to like and subscribe because I'll be bringing more content related to World War II games in the future. But anyway, that is all I have. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.